The deepest horrors are not found in the noise of battle, but in the silence after the applause has faded. The polished brass of the award gleamed brightly under the artificial sun, a monument to a dream that was meant to save the world. But now, it serves only as a mirror, reflecting the ghost of the woman who held it. She was a genius, a bright light in a darkening age, and she gave humanity the key to lasting peace and clean energy. Yet, her generous gift was taken, twisted, and reforged into the perfect weapon, silent, invisible, and absolute. This is the story of Alara Vane, who paid for her brilliance with her freedom, her hope, and the agonizing knowledge that her masterpiece became the world's undoing. What happens when the very thing designed for life is used only for quiet death? The laboratory air always smelled the same: ozone, metal, and Alara Vane's favorite strong coffee. For Alara, this room was not a workplace. It was a sanctuary where the laws of nature bent to her will. Her focus now was the ether core. It was small, no bigger than a football, but inside, it held the secret to endless, clean power. Alara adjusted the final energy conduit, her movements precise and quick. Her brown hair was pulled back tightly, and the dark circles under her eyes spoke of 72 straight hours of work. But her heart was pounding not from exhaustion, but from pure, ecstatic anticipation. This was the moment. "Status, Kai?" she whispered into the calm. A calm, deep voice replied through the speaker. "All systems green, Alara. Pressure stable at $3.50 /text. GPA $. You are clear for activation." Alara took a deep breath. She pressed a large, glowing red button marked simply, "Activate." There was no explosion, no loud bang. Instead, the ether core began to hum, a deep, resonant sound like a massive, sleeping bell. A gentle, soft blue light pulsed from the core's housing. A nearby monitor, which had been draining power from the city grid at a massive rate, suddenly showed the opposite. It was feeding power back. The energy gauge on the screen shot up, stabilizing at a level that could power a small town for a year. All this from a device that needed almost no fuel to keep running. It was pure, sustainable energy. Alara laughed, a genuine, joyful sound that echoed off the metal walls. She had done it. She had solved the world's energy crisis. No more fighting over oil. No more coal smoke. No more poverty born from resource scarcity. Her assistant, Kai, rushed in, a rare smile on his face. He was her only team member, a man of quiet loyalty and sharp eyes. "It worked, Alara. We did it. The world changes today." "Not today, Kai," Alara corrected, her eyes shining with tears of relief. "It changes tomorrow. We need to secure the patent and make sure this belongs to everyone, not just the highest bidder." But even as she spoke the words "highest bidder," a cold knot formed in her stomach. She knew the world was not as pure as her lab. Corporations and powerful governments, known collectively as the Directorate, controlled everything. They were vast, wealthy, and unseen, pulling the strings of global supply and demand. If they got their hands on the ether core, they wouldn't use it to free the world. They would use it to control it. She spent the next few weeks trying to find independent, ethical channels to release her design. She drafted contracts that demanded the ether core remain open source and affordable. She put safeguards and unique signature codes deep within the core's operating system, codes only she understood. She was trying to build a fortress around her invention, but the walls of the Directorate were already closing in, silent and relentless. One morning, a sleek black car pulled up to her hidden warehouse. Two impeccably dressed individuals stepped out. They introduced themselves as representatives of global stability, but their eyes held the empty chill of deep space. They didn't ask for a demonstration. They didn't ask about the science. They just showed her a document with the highest, most unbelievable number she had ever seen. Money enough to fund independent research for the next century, with the promise that the core would be distributed ethically and immediately. The contract looked perfect. The promises were magnificent. The pressure was overwhelming. Alara knew she was dancing with a predator, but she also knew that if she refused, the directorate would simply take the core and silence her anyway. She had to choose the path that gave her the most control, even if that control felt like a flimsy thread. She told Kai to back up all the core schematics and hide them. Then, with a heavy hand, she agreed to the meeting that would change everything. She was walking into the lion's den, but in her mind, she was still the master of the fire she carried. She was terribly wrong. The meeting place was an office that seemed to float in the sky. It was on the top floor of the tallest tower in the city, a place so high the street noise was just a faint, impossible whisper. The room was all glass and white marble, clean and cold. It felt less like an office and more like a tomb made of light. Alara sat at a massive, polished black table. She was facing a man named Director Thorne. Thorne was the directorate's face, chosen for his perfectly calm manner and his eyes that never seemed to blink. He wore a suit that looked woven from shadows, and he didn't smile. Not once. Dr. Vane. Thorne's voice was smooth, like oil on glass. The ether core is a marvel. It will stabilize our world. We are grateful for your genius. I only ask for one thing, Alara said, her voice steady, though her hands were shaking slightly under the table. She pushed a printed clause toward him. The design must be open source. It must be made cheap and free for every nation and every person. No patents. No locking it away for profit. Thorne glanced at the paper, then back at Alara. His expression did not change. We fully understand your humanitarian impulse, Dr. Vane. The directorate's goal is stability. The core will be distributed globally, but responsibly. To ensure stability, we must manage the release. It cannot be given away instantly. That would cause chaos in the current energy markets. He slid the official contract back to her. It was thick, bound in dark leather. We have included a huge fund for your future research, far beyond what you asked. Your life will be dedicated only to science, free from all worries. You will be celebrated as the savior of this era. Alara looked at the document. It was a dizzying mix of promise and control. The payment was vast, ensuring she would never need to work for money again. But the control was hidden in the fine print. Exclusive rights to development, testing, and deployment. That meant they decided where the core went and how it was used. She hesitated. She felt a powerful, icy feeling crawling up her spine. This felt wrong. Every single cell in her body screamed danger. But she looked out the window at the distant sprawl of the city, at the smoke pouring from old power plants, and she thought of the millions of people who lived in cold, dark homes. If she said no, Thorne would just leave, and they would take the core anyway through force or legal trickery. By signing, she might be able to hold them to the ethical clauses she had fought for. You promise that the core will be used for energy alone? Alara asked, needing to hear the lie one last time. Thorne leaned forward, his gaze intense. It will be used to power the future, Dr. Vane. Nothing more. We protect the future. It was the perfect answer. Technical but hollow. He didn't promise it wouldn't be changed or repurposed. But she was tired. She was cornered. She picked up the specialized stylus. The moment she touched the screen on the final page and her name appeared, the room seemed to change. The coldness deepened. Thorne's face finally held a hint of something. A brief flash of triumph that was immediately hidden. He rose. Welcome to the future, Dr. Vane. Your security detail will now escort you to your new residence. It is a place perfectly suited for someone of your global importance. Safe, quiet, and fully secured. Security detail. The word hung in the air, heavy and solid. It sounded like protection, but it felt like the click of a lock. Alara didn't reply. She felt the chill of the marble floor through her thin shoes. She realized she hadn't signed a contract. She had signed her own life away. Her world-saving dream was now out of her hands, and the silence in that high-up office was the sound of her hope dying. Alara's new residence was everything the contract promised. Massive, beautiful, and utterly isolated. It was a penthouse suite spanning an entire floor of a private tower, far from the city center. It had high ceilings, floor-to-ceiling windows, and priceless art on the walls. It was a museum, not a home. The day she arrived, everything seemed perfect. Two polite, silent guards stood at the entrance elevator, which only moved with her unique biometric code. A robot chef prepared her favorite meals. The view was breathtaking, but by the end of the first week, the beauty had become a cage of velvet and glass. First, she noticed the small things. The smart home system, which controlled the temperature and lighting, had been updated. Now, it required a secondary security clearance for things like opening the windows more than a few inches. She couldn't override the system, even with her genius skills. Next, her communication failed. She tried to call Kai, her loyal assistant, to check on the hidden backup schematics. Her phone, a brand new, secure model given to her by the directorate, simply showed an error. Satellite link down message whenever she tried an external number. She tried email, then secure messaging. Nothing went out. Nothing came in. When she asked the chief guard, a man named Jackson, about the communication failure, he gave a practiced, hollow reply. The system is being upgraded, Doctor. For your security. Global threats are high. We must ensure no one can track you, track her, or keep her from tracking them. The truth hit Alara with the force of a physical blow. She wasn't a guest. She was a trophy. She was being held hostage in the most luxurious prison in the world. She walked from room to room, the silence of the massive apartment pressing down on her. The quiet was the most terrifying part. There was no sound of the city, no friendly chirp of a communication signal, no knock on the door, only the echo of her own footsteps on the marble floor. She tried to work. The directorate had given her a new, powerful workstation, supposedly to continue her research. But when she opened the programs, she found the network was completely closed off from the world. It had the highest level of computing power, but it was just a giant, silent calculator. She couldn't access news, scientific journals, or even basic public data. She was cut off from all current events. Her anxiety grew into a deep, heavy fear. What were they doing with the ether core? They had the final, fully functional design. They had the core source code. They no longer needed her hands. They only needed her silence. One night, unable to sleep, she wandered into the main living area. The wall was a huge glass screen showing a 3D topographic map of the planet, a feature they had installed to inspire her work. As she watched the map, she noticed something strange. In a remote, contested region thousands of miles away, a large cluster of colored lights that usually showed activity, power lines, communication hubs, small towns, suddenly went dark. The black spot wasn't caused by a storm or a power outage. It just vanished from the map, replaced by a smooth, blank gray patch. A few hours later, another spot far away in a completely different country did the same. Alara's mind raced. The core was designed to power things up, not shut them down. But she had included a very specific high-frequency energy modulator, a safety feature that could, in theory, overload and silence any power grid it was connected to. To do that on a massive scale, the Directorate must have repurposed the core's design. They must have turned her infinite energy source into a silent, area-specific energy drain, a clean, untraceable weapon of mass power destruction. The chilling silence of her prison was being echoed by a new, more terrifying silence in the outside world. Her heart froze. She realized that the price of her genius was not just her freedom, but the beginning of a quiet, new kind of war. The blank spots on the global map were growing. Slowly, chillingly, the colorful patches of light representing human life and industry were being erased. Alara couldn't get news, but she had the 3D map, and that was enough. The map was honest, even if the Directorate was not. She started a strict, secret routine. Every night, after the guards had settled into their routine and the robot maintenance drone had passed, she would sit by the glowing map. She tracked the black spots. They never happened near the Directorate's own strongholds. They always appeared in areas controlled by rival global powers, places where resources were rich or political control was weak. The pattern was unmistakable. The silent attacks were surgical. Alara knew the science behind it. The ether core, when reversed, didn't create a boom or fire. It created a perfect, localized energy vacuum. It could draw the power, the communications, and the electronic life force out of an entire district, silently, leaving behind only confusion and darkness. No bombs, no smoke, just a sudden, total collapse of technology and power. This was a perfect weapon of soft control. Her horror was now a constant, freezing weight in her chest. She had created this monster. Every dark spot on that map was a direct result of her brilliance. She needed proof. She needed to know exactly how they had made the change. Alara started exploring the small, closed computer network they had given her. It was supposed to be a tool for her research, but it was just a locked library. But Alara was the inventor of the core. She understood how technology was built and how it was hidden. She remembered the unique, almost invisible digital signature she had placed in the core's core operating system, COS, before the Directorate took it. It was a digital fingerprint, designed to confirm that she was the original creator. For days, she worked on the useless network, using advanced coding techniques she had invented herself. She wasn't trying to break out. She was trying to find a whisper inside. It was slow, frustrating work, like trying to pick a diamond lock with a feather. Finally, late one night, she found it. Deep inside the protected area of the network's data logs, a place they thought she would never look, she found a partial, coded log of data transfer. It wasn't the main plan, but it contained a small, repeating piece of encrypted data. Alara stared at the screen, her breath catching in her throat. She recognized the structure immediately. It was the Ether core signature code. It was her digital fingerprint, but it had been wrapped in a new, dark shell of code. It was like seeing a beautiful drawing of a flower wrapped in barbed wire. She quickly decrypted the shell. The internal notes were clinical, horrifying, and brief. Project silence. Deployment successful. Energy signature decay rate nominal. Targeted area completely neutralized. Minimal physical damage. Reversal cycle initiated. Repeat sequence tomorrow. Project silence. The words burned into her mind. They weren't just destroying power grids. They were using her invention to enforce a new, terrifying global order, one where any country that resisted the Directorate would simply be turned off. Alara felt a sudden, powerful rage, a heat of determination against the cold of her fear. She wasn't just a prisoner. She was a witness to global crime. Her silence was their shield. She had to break it. She stood up from the computer, her whole body trembling. She looked out the window at the distant, sparkling lights of the city that was still running, still unaware. She knew her enemy now. She had seen their plan. She just needed a way to fight back, a way to use the very cage they had built to send her warning to the world. Alara knew she couldn't fight the Directorate with power. They had armies, wealth, and now the Ether Core weapon. She had to fight them with the one thing she still controlled: the knowledge of the system's flaws. The Directorate had made a critical mistake. They had isolated her computer network from the outside world for security, but they had also connected it to the building's internal utility systems. This was common for a smart building. The computer needed to talk to the lights, the heating, the elevator, and the central power regulation. Alara focused on the elevator system. The elevator was a complex machine, and its software needed small, brief connections to a low-level, external satellite for routine maintenance and safety checks. It was a tiny, digital whisper that left the building once every few days. This whisper was her only way out. She had to create a digital failsafe, a hidden message, and attach it to that elevator maintenance ping. The failsafe was a small data packet containing the full, uncorrupted schematics of the Ether Core, the logs of Project Silence she had found, and a desperate plea to Kai, her trusted assistant. The work was slow and terrifying. She had to build her program in tiny pieces, sometimes writing only 10 lines of code a day. She hid the pieces inside old, unused system files on her computer, making them look like routine error logs or digital dust. The biggest danger was the constant surveillance. She knew her quarters were fully monitored, not just by cameras, but by software that watched her keystrokes and system activity. To trick the monitoring software, Alara developed a technique she called the ghosting. She would open a fake document, a long, complicated study on the life cycle of a rare butterfly, and type out simple, meaningless sentences about insects. But at the same time, using a series of specific, quick keystrokes that she had memorized, she would open a hidden window and type the real, dangerous code. When the surveillance software recorded her activity, it would only see her looking at butterfly data. One night, the stress almost broke her. She was working on the most complex part of the failsafe, the part that would attach her data to the elevator's outgoing signal. She made a tiny mistake in the keystroke sequence. The hidden window flashed briefly on her main screen. She froze. For 5 heart-stopping minutes, she didn't move, listening to the silence of the apartment. Had the system caught the flash? Had the unseen eyes noticed the error? A soft, robotic voice came from the ceiling speaker. "Dr. Vane, your pulse rate is elevated. Are you experiencing distress? Should I alert medical staff?" Alara closed her eyes, forcing her breathing to slow. The system was only reacting to her biology, not her code. She forced a calm voice. "No, just a sudden headache. I will rest now." The light above the camera lens flickered, then stabilized. The moment of danger passed. Alara knew she had no more time. The global map showed 3 new, massive black spots this week alone. The Directorate was accelerating its plan. The next night, with trembling hands, she finished the final script. She bundled the damning evidence into the smallest possible packet and wrote a final message to Kai. "Kai, the flower is a weapon. Use the original seed. Tell the world." She activated the program. It was a silent countdown. It would wait for the next time the elevator system pinged the external satellite, an event set to happen in 48 hours. She had launched the ghost. Now, all she could do was wait in the silence and hope that the tiny whisper would break the monstrous roar of the Directorate. The final 2 days were the longest of Alara's life. She spent the time in a forced calm, watching old nature documentaries and avoiding the main computer. She needed to look harmless, quiet, and completely defeated. She watched the clock, counting down to the exact second the elevator maintenance ping was scheduled to happen. When the moment arrived, it was entirely silent. There was no flash, no alarm, no confirmation noise. Alara only knew it had happened because the small digital clock on the elevator panel briefly reset itself, the system rebooting after its external check-in. A tiny, powerful stream of data, the truth about the Ether Core and Project Silence, had left the building. It was a single, silent whisper sent to the vast, open noise of the global internet. Now she waited for the echo. Took only 3 hours. Jackson, the head guard, burst into her apartment for the first time without knocking. His calm, controlled face was gone, replaced by pure, frantic rage. Behind him, other guards were sealing every door, checking every window. The network, Jackson roared, pointing a shaking finger at Alara. Something left the network. What did you do? Alara looked up, calm now that the final move had been made. The fear was gone, replaced by a deep, weary peace. I sent a message, Jackson. The truth. You are locked in. It's impossible. You used my technology, Alara said simply, and you built your cage using my own blueprint. I always knew where the weak spots were. Jackson ordered the guards to seize her, but before they could move, the building began to change. The lighting flickered violently. The automatic window shades slammed shut. The smooth, constant hum of the tower's private power grid faltered and groaned. The building systems were reacting to the sudden, massive data leak. More importantly, the global map on her wall was behaving wildly. The black spots were no longer growing. Instead, they were flashing red, showing error warnings as the leaked schematics reached independent scientists and engineers around the world. These experts were quickly realizing how to detect and counter the silent weapon. The Directorate was not just dealing with a data leak. They were dealing with the sudden, global understanding of their secret technology. The weapon's silence was broken. Jackson grabbed Alara's arm roughly. You have ruined everything. The Director will ensure you never see the light again. Alara felt the sharp pain, but didn't flinch. I already haven't seen the light for months, Jackson, but the world is about to. You used the flower to make poison. I gave them the antidote. The guards dragged Alara away. Her mind was already separating itself from her body, accepting the fate she had known was coming since she signed that contract. Her physical story was ending, trapped in the cold, silent machine she had tried to save the world from. But her sacrifice was not in vain. Across the globe, the whisper she sent was becoming a deafening echo. Independent news services, previously controlled or silenced by the Directorate, began to release the full schematics of the Ether Core, confirming Alara Vane's original goal: free, clean energy for all. But alongside the gift was the terrifying evidence of Project Silence, the quiet war the world didn't know it was fighting. The truth did not bring instant peace. It brought shock, panic, and a painful global reckoning. But for the first time, people understood the true quiet enemy. The Directorate's perfect, silent control was shattered by the revelation. The world would not be saved overnight, but it was finally awake. The life of Alara Vane ended in a cage, a silent tragedy for the brilliant woman who gave everything. But her final whisper of code echoed out, forever changing the air, turning the cold darkness of the world into a painful, but necessary, dawn. The story of Alara was a reminder that the purest intentions, when betrayed, cast the darkest shadow. But even the darkest shadow can be defeated by a single, desperate light.